All right, we're starting a little early on the live YouTube because we had a lot of questions, really good questions from subscribers, and I wanted to go over that before we actually start. But feel free, we're early, but feel free if you're watching to ask questions, any question related to upholstery. I'll try to answer it. But one of the good questions that we had that came in was from Gina, and she was wondering how to attach foam, polyurethane. And it was really a good question because there's a few things that you can do to attach foam. Well, first of all, I should say that I use a lot of springs. I like coil springs. So therefore, on the seats, I'm not often, hardly at all, using foam for my seats. But a lot of you people out there, and a lot of upholsterers today, exclusively use foam. And which is okay. It speeds the process up, as long as your client is aware of it. But it's a whole different ball game when you're not using springs. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So with foam, if you're going to use foam for this seat, for instance, let's say you would the webbing procedure. First of all, I want to show you. I have the webbing at the bottom of the frame of the chair. Okay, the bottom is where the webbing should be when you're having coil springs, not at the top of the chair, not here. So if you're not putting coil springs in, you're actually putting your webbing system, and I use that jute webbing up at the top. So same array of webbing, you're interlacing it, and it would be on the top. Then you would put your foam on. So let's pretend that this is webbed up on the top, and then you have a piece of foam. Now, with the most important part of any piece of furniture is your front edge. So if you're going to be using foam, you have to be really careful about how you put foam on, so that your foam doesn't start wandering back, and that will happen in no time at all. Just be really careful. It's nothing worse. I don't know if any of you have seen furniture. You go in and you see the front edge is all loose, or worse yet, you can start seeing the wood portion of the frame coming through. That's because it was improperly set. And I see we have a question already.
This is from Carol. Can you make upholstery buttons without a press? Is there some do-it-yourself method?
There is. It depends on the size of the button. So the bigger the button, the easier it is to make by hand. I actually can show you. I'm going to show you how to do it right now, or explain to you how to do it. So you need a good nylon thread. Now, I've never made a handmade number 22 or the small button doing this, so you'd have to experiment. But if I were you, I'd experiment on a bigger button first. And what you do is, let me just get one of my buttons out here. Good question, though, because not everybody has the beautiful button machine that I have, which is very expensive. It makes a solid, good button, and more importantly than the machine are the dies that you're using to make a good button. But yes, you can make a button by hand. Usually what we do, even I'm making buttons by hand on bolsters that are pleated bolsters. I'm not sure if that's what Carol has, but let's assume you have a big button to work. Now, I'm going to show you a larger button. See, but a bolster button is even bigger than that. So what you want to do is you cut your fabric about, let's see, cut your fabric about an inch over the size of the shell of the button, and then with your hammer, hold on one second, I'll be right back. Just cut myself. Let me show you that. Got myself on live TV. So when I reached into my little button, I cut my finger. Not serious, but enough so that I had to just grab a piece of paper towel. So what you're going to do with your button is you're going to cut the fabric about an inch bigger, and then you're going to take that nylon twine and a curved needle, and you're going to thread the outside edge of the circular piece that you cut. And then what you're going to do is put the shell down over the fabric, and then you need to know how to do a slip knot. As a matter of fact, I think there is a YouTube video that we show how to do this, so you might want to check out the channel too to see that. I believe there is one. But then the slip knot is really the most important part of this, because that's what really tightens the fabric around the shell of the button, and then you have a handmade button. They're really hard to do. You know, it's much easier to have a good button machine. But that's a good question, Carol. So, another question, okay.
This one's from Jimmy.
From Jimmy.
What is the best type of foam to use for a chair? Memory foam?
I wouldn't use memory foam, Jimmy. I've not had good luck with that. I think it works in a negative way with fabric, so I wouldn't advise that at all. What we have is high density polyurethane foam, and I'm using a middle firmness, a mid firmness on that, and I use it in most commonly 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. Memory foam, though, I don't particularly like in upholstery. I think in other uses it might be okay. But good question. That's a really good question. So, any other questions right now, Michaela?
Nope, not right now.
Okay. So, getting back to my chair here with the foam. So, like I said, on this one here, we do have springs going on this. So, I might not even put any foam in it, because with the springs, you have the springs, you have the burlap. I'm going to put rubberized horsehair. I'm going to put cotton, and I might put a double layer of cotton. But I'm going to see if I like the crown, and if I don't like the crown, I'm going to add, the only thing I'm going to add on that would be a 1 inch piece of foam on that, with the springs. Now this chair, this is a restoration, so we're using a combination. Everything that came out of that chair was no good, so we had to get rid of it, except for the springs. The springs are the only thing that are going to be reusable. As a matter of fact, Michaela right now, I'm going to grab one of the springs that she's doing, that she hasn't done actually. Just gonna grab one for her. So Michaela is taking all these twines individually. She's taking all these twines off the old springs, and I'm going to reuse these. There's nothing wrong with these, and they're the proper size for this chair. It's the only thing on the chair that I can reuse other than the wood frame. But I like them. We're going to 8-way tie them like they were before. So getting back, let's get back to the foam. Okay. So if you're upholstering out there, I'm sure you've had the experience of cutting your finger. I mean, this isn't a bad cut. It's just a bleed. Sorry about that. But really important not to get blood on your fabric, right? And if you do get blood on your fabric, the best thing to do is cold water. Cold water neutralizes it completely. The idea is to catch it before it dries. So I'm not sure if it works great on dried blood. But so let's get back to our foam cushion. So we're live here, so anything can happen, and it did just now. So, let's see. So, how to attach a bigger piece of foam, because that's what you're faced with when you don't put springs in. You have to make up the difference, right? So this in the middle, this crown with the springs, I would estimate to be about 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches actually. That's the crown height. So you actually, and that's from the bottom. That's measuring from the bottom up. So if you're going from the top, you want about 4 inches from the top as a crown. Okay, so foam doesn't crown. You have to make it crown. You have to work. So the idea of foam, very good question from Gina. The idea of foam is you're trying to make it look like, on the seat I'm talking about, a crown seat, right? A crown seat like a traditionally that you would be doing with the springs. So the way to do that, the best way to do that, I have this out from this muslin out to show you in a minute some other technique. So if you're wanting a crown edge on a thick piece of foam, right? a crown edge, not a straight edge. I'll show you a straight edge in a minute. You need to put this in, okay? And this is a this is a 3-inch piece of foam. Okay, now the very first thing you need to do though is put an edge on that front. Why do you put an edge on? Jimmy, why do you put an edge on? Actually, I think, is that Jimmy that is being featured in the next series of classes, Patrick?
Yes, it is.
It is Jimmy.
The same Jimmy.
The same Jimmy. He's working on an unbelievable project. He's working on an ottoman that he brought to us, and he finished it already. He finished it before the 6 weeks. So we were surprise ending for his show. It's a very unusual piece of furniture. I won't give it away yet, but you should stay tuned for that. Sign up for the classes, please. That's what keeps us going, right? So, do we have another question? Yes.
Yes, this is from Jimmy again.
From Jimmy.
Can you explain the type of springs you would use on a chair? Is there such thing as a harder spring?
Wow, that is a good question. There are seat springs and there are back springs. Seat springs are wider gauge and they are firmer because you're supporting the whole body. Back springs are thinner gauge and softer. Now we do use back springs in some furniture, some really high-end furniture. I think of Turkish, I don't know if anybody knows what a Turkish chair looks like, but that has springs everywhere except the outsides. It has springs in the seat, which would be the heavier gauge spring. It has springs on the inside arms, and those are the lighter gauge. It has springs on the top arms and on the back, all lighter gauge springs, all needing to be 8-way tied. Now, you use a different twine. The seat gets the ruby twine on a Turkish chair. Anytime you do back springs, it gets a lighter, usually the nylon twine. Jimmy, where are you getting all these brainy questions? They're really good. Keep them coming, man. So the nylon twine is what we use to tie. Now, how often does a Turkish chair come up in a career of an upholsterer with me? I'm a professional upholsterer. I'm getting a lot of pieces per week. I tell you, I've probably had maybe a half dozen in my lifetime. So it doesn't come up often. Maybe if we do get one, we'll feature it on a YouTube channel. We have another question.
This is from Carol.
Hi, Carol.
So is it a very bad idea to put foam right on a webbing?
Bad idea. No, not at all. That's the only thing you could do. I guess, what else would you do if you're not using, keep in mind, foam is a batting. Cotton is a batting. Hay is a batting. Horsehair, real horsehair, is a batting. Rubberized horsehair is a batting. Dacron is a batting. It's up to you, as the upholsterer, to pick which batting is appropriate for what you're doing. It's like cooking, being a chef. You're putting all these ingredients together, and you want it to be, look wonderful when it's done, and feel wonderful, which is even more important. You want your customer. I mean, that's what we're trying to do as upholsterers, right? We're trying to make it a coziest piece of furniture as we can. So your question is, no, you can go over. You want probably an in-between piece there. Webbing burlap, maybe. Maybe that's your question, yeah. So you should use burlap with webbing. And I'm not sure if I said that on this, because you could see that. I would have to really think about that when I'm doing it, because I don't do a lot of it. So I think that's what you were asking. So if you put webbing on this, I'm going to turn this chair up to show you, actually, bottom of this chair. For all you concerned out there, I think the blood flow is minimum now. Thank you. So, I like to have fun too, right? So you see the little holes in here? Little gaps? That definitely, before you put the foam on the flip side up top here, should be filled with burlap. You should put burlap on. I see we have another question.
This is also from Carol. She's
Okay.
wondering, do you need some sort of type of fabric between the webbing and the foam?
So I just answered that, and it's the appropriate, you need to use the appropriate material too. Burlap is the best thing to use over webbing. Best material to use, because it just has that certain amount of resiliency Okay, so if you use anything else, usually it's actually too tight. Like the replacement for burlap, which is a jute, is nylon. And let me tell you, I have a nylon twine that I just showed you. In some cases, I like synthetics, but not when it comes to webbing and burlap. And I'll tell you why on the webbing. So, especially if you're doing coil springs. So, webbing has a natural tendency to loosen or sag over time. And that's actually a really good thing over the lifetime of a piece of furniture. Because with all the pressure that you're going to have on your 8-way ties up here, the pressure's coming, it has to go somewhere. Okay, so if you have the jute, it will go down and the jute will loosen up over time and the springs won't be jeopardized up top. How many people have seen springs starting to go all crazy up at the top? Look at the bottom. It's either because it's a webbing, it's a nylon on the webbing, or worse yet, they have metal straps. So it's actually doing too good of a job. And do we have another question, Michaela?
No.
Okay. So we're really excited about some of the projects that we're seeing coming into the shop and also what the students are bringing us. Michelle, if you guys are signed up, you've seen Michelle. She's actually doing her next project. It's going to be a fully upholstered tub chair. So I think that will be exciting. And she actually asked me, should she strip it down before she brings it? I said, no, I want people to see the techniques of stripping furniture. And there are ways of speeding you guys up, especially you guys who are in the journeyman period of your education. I think for all of you real beginners, though, you should start with the low impact stripping, maybe the one tack at a time, one staple at a time, just to get used to the tools, just to get your hands strong and all that. When you've been doing it for a while, there are techniques that I'll show you that will speed you up in stripping a piece of furniture, because you can really spend a lot of time on stripping a piece of furniture. So we'll show you with Michelle. I asked her, bring the chair and we'll show people how to do it a little faster. So getting back to foam use instead of spring use. So this is interesting. I was just about to tell you that no matter how you're going to finish your seat, whether it's going to be a straight edge or a crown, you need to make sure that with an edging, you need to put an edge on, an edge roll like so. Okay, now this happens to be the smaller one, which is probably what I would pick for this, and that's kind of a judgment call. There are 3 different sizes to the edge roll, and this is the small, which I would use on this. But then you have a medium and a large. That's used for other purposes, but for here, you know, the thing I like about upholstery too is the fact that you're the artist. This is where the artistry comes in, okay? Now, you'll say, well, I would have used a big edge roll. Well, fine. You can use a big edge roll. So it's not going to change a lot, except it's going to make this front edge a little thicker. So if that's what you want, that's fine. So the reason I would process, yes?
That's what it says. It's officially 5 o'clock. Maybe reintroduce the people.
Oh, right.
We did advertise 5, so.
So we just wanted to say we advertised 5. We started a little early today because there were some questions that came in on email, some really good questions. So we just wanted, and I'm actually in the middle of explaining, I guess, one good question that somebody had, and I'll say it again, is that when do you use foam? When do you use springs? It was something like that. And I was just talking about if this was a foam seat, how I would finish it. So the webbing would be up at the top, would put our burlap on, and then the foam choice and the edge roll choice. So we were talking also about how it's kind of like a great recipe, you know. What's going to look good? What are the materials you're going to use? You're going to use synthetic cottons, well, you know. It's a combination actually, and I'll show you. So it's a small edge roll that I would use, okay? And I like that because I don't want to make this front real thick. So if you look at the chair, it's a fan back, beautiful fan back chair. If you look at this chair, it's a very dainty looking chair, so I try to minimize it a little bit on the front edge. So we're looking for aesthetically an overall beautiful, thinned out chair. But actually too, you won't believe it, it will be comfortable too. It'll be comfortable. So that's going to go on there, and then our foam. Okay. Now, the difference between foaming a seat and springing a seat is about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours for a beginner. Can you believe that? It's true. Hand-tied coil springs take a while, but they're so beautiful and they're so comfortable. The foam, 15 minutes. Can you believe that? 15 to a half of an hour. Yeah. So you get this lined up like so, and then you put your foam, you cut your foam to the back, you cut your corners, and you want the foam to tuck underneath this rail. See this rail here? It's a separation rail. It's not a rail that you should be tacking to. So the foam just kind of nestles in there in the bag. And then on the front, this is what we're going to do. Attaching this is so important. It's so important. I'll show you what I don't like. Because some people, what they do is they muslin this. And then they pull it down and they staple the muslin. The reason I don't like that is because the foam, I guarantee you, with seating, is going to pull away from the front edge. So I really wouldn't advise you. Some people muslin the whole thing and tack it down, and some people just glue the front edge like this and then tack it down. Either one of those two, I don't think is as effective as this way. Watch this. So what you're going to do, and by the way, I think this is going to be, I'm just going to tuck that in just a little bit more just to show you. Any other questions before I get to this next stage?
No.
Okay. So, I'll leave that there for a second and get my gun. I'm not going to plug this in because, like I said, we're not putting foam on this. I mean, we're putting springs on, so I don't have my hose attached, so don't think that, look at him, he doesn't have his hose on the gun. I don't need it for this demonstration. So let's say I have this all stapled down on the front. See this piece here? What you're going to do is with your thumb, you're going to tuck that in, and then you're going to have this nestle in on the inside of that edge roll, and you're going to staple it, okay? And you're going to staple it right across. You're going to fold it and staple it. So what you end up with is something like this, okay? Isn't that nice? Now, this isn't enough for me. I want to make sure that over time, those staples, the foam doesn't pop through the staples, and they can. So I want you to take the additional step of putting a cardboard just on the front edge, just on the front edge. You're going to take a piece of cardboard tack tape, and that's going to go over the staples that you put in, and you're going to staple that down. You probably want to be using big staples, okay, 1/2-inch staples. Now, people say, how do I get through all that foam? You couldn't get through all that foam there. I want to show you again, without the edge roll, without the tack tape, what I did. I'm going to slow it down to show you. You take your thumbs, right, and go like this. Now I'm standing off so you guys can see, but you go like this with your thumbs. You fold it under so that you're actually only catching on that front edge. You could do this with 4-inch foam, by the way. The only foam you're catching is probably about 1/2 of an inch up at the top. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So you can sculpt seats that look like an 8-way tie, and I'll tell you, they fool people, not me, but they can fool people into thinking that they have an 8-way tie spring. But as far as comfort goes, it's nothing like an 8-way tie spring. But it's amazing that the time difference on this. So, do we have any other questions, Michaela? Jimmy had a lot of questions today, actually. Jimmy was putting a base welt on a stool, finishing up, and putting a base welt on can be tricky too, because most people want to put a base welt. That's a welt that goes around the bottom of a piece of furniture, even with the piece of furniture, even with the upholstery. But in reality, you have to be just ever so slightly. I would say, if I had to guess, about 1/4 of an inch. No, it would be less than that, about 1/16 of an inch out. But it's actually, you have to use your eye Do you know what I'm talking about? Just like when you see, if you can sign up, just for that one tip alone, when Jimmy's doing that, is I think really valuable because it makes the difference. It makes the difference between a really custom job and not so custom job. So how many people do we have watching now, Patrick?
We have 11 people.
That's good. So we welcome the questions. We have a question now.
This is from Jimmy again.
Okay.
How many springs do you use for a chair that size? Is there a formula to estimate the number?
That's a good question. You can overload on the springs. This particular, how many springs do we have on that table over there, Michaela? Can you count them for me?
There's 12.
So there are 6 springs on this one. And so what you want is the space between the springs shouldn't be too close, because the worst thing in the world is have 2 springs clipping one another, and nothing shouts out to a customer about a poor job than a clicking noise every time they sit down. Well, that's got to be the worst sound in the world, even though it might not mean that the chair's going to fall apart or anything. It just means that the springs are too close to one another. Jimmy, I'm telling you, you have good questions. So when you're putting springs in, you probably want, I guess the rule of thumb would be maybe 2 or 3 inches away from one another, okay? And then how they're put in, the more traditional way would be 5 springs, would be for a smaller seat, would be a spring in the middle and 4 around it. So you'd have your first, your first spring tying would be from the back to the front, and then side to side. But then when you do you do an X to get that middle spring done, and then you have an 8-way tie spring. But we have wonderful on the channel, Jimmy, if you're interested, go to the Broadway Upholstery School YouTube channel, and you'll see me tying springs. And it brings up another good question, a good thing to talk about, is that on the website, on our website, BroadwayUpholsterySchool.com, we're going to be showing people how to teach their own classes. And I would definitely, if you have a shop, you're starting a shop, you're thinking about starting a shop, it's almost like you should be teaching even before you open up your shop. Get yourself known in your area. The adult ed classes are always looking for upholsterers. I started in the 80s teaching upholstery at one of the local high schools in the Boston area, and it quickly became the most popular class. So it would fill up, you would have a great class, and I'm going to show you on an hour and a half video how to teach a class tying springs, basically, but doing an ottoman right from the scratch, from A to Z. And then I'm going to have a teacher's guide for you. I'm going to have a instruction. It's going to be step by step on how to upholster this stool A to Z. Both using the nice thing about the YouTube videos, it shows you how to use hand tools and pneumatic staple gun on the same stool. The reason that's important, and we'll explain this we're going to have a new video about how to teach upholstery. By the way, you know, and most people pay their instructors between $20 and $30 an hour to teach a class, and you get about 24 hours of class time over 6 to 8 weeks. It's pretty good way to introduce yourself to a community too. So we have another question.
Will Tax work to do this?
Who's asking that?
Gina.
Gina, good question. Yes, depends on the tack size, but for all you using tacks out there, and I know that there are a lot of people probably doing that before you buy your gun. You can use the tack. So if I were doing it, I probably would try my 6-ounce tacks, depends on how thick the foam is. And then if it's not effective, you go to the big tack. Now, when you see this other video that I'm talking about, it shows you how to do this with tacks. You need to use when you're doing tacks, hold on a second. This is important. The key to using tacks on foam is using your cardboard tack tape. So you take a piece about 1 inch long, you tack one and one end like this, and then you just connect the pieces. And you definitely, on this chair here, don't fret, you know, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's just the front edge you're doing here. You don't have to tack down, as long as my stretcher rails are holding the foam down. You don't have to tack that, nor do you want to, because I want this at the top of my separation rail up here. So do you follow me? Really good questions, you guys. Keep it coming. I mean, there's so much to learn, isn't there? But practice makes perfect, right? Anybody else before I go to the next step? Okay. So, how do you do it if you want not a crown edge, but if you're putting a piping around here and you're trying to make it look like a boxed edge, right? Well, then you definitely, I think, have to use muslin, okay? So, think about that too. You really can't use the technique that I just showed you about securing the front edge. I really do believe the best way to secure a front edge with foam is with it folded with the tacks, like I showed you. So if you're not going to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to take a piece of muslin, right, and you're going to glue this off the chair. Actually, what you want to do is you can have a lot longer piece of muslin if you want, just about like that. But you want it to come up to the top like that, and this would be your pull. So you're gonna dress this up with glue. I'll be honest with you, I hate using glue, but we have another question. Hold on.
This is from Gina as well. Will the tacks work for holding the top edge of the foam down?
No. If you're trying to get a tack, even a big tack, through all of that like that, you're not going to do it. You'd have to go to almost the nail, and I don't advise going to nails. The biggest tack you guys should be using out there, 12 or 14 ounce tack, is the biggest upholstery tack. Now we all know the difference between an upholstery tack and a nail that you can get, even a brad that you can get in the store. Upholstery tacks are more pointed, they go into the wood better, they're not as harsh on the wood as nails will be. So now I have seen people make this mistake with nails, and the way to determine a nail from an upholstery tack, nails are silver, upholstery tacks are blue, because upholstery tacks are still sterilized. That's how you can tell. But when you do that, if you're going to take this edge like this, if your idea is to drive some nails here, first of all, it's going to create divots, which I don't like. But some people have done this on edge roll. They've used nails. I'm trying to prevent a big mistake from everybody out there. They go right through the edge roll with the nail. So what happens with the nail? Over time, you'd be surprised. They work their way up. So the seating, as you're sitting, that nail's slowly working its way out because it doesn't have the prongs that the 14 ounce tack would have that holds the tack in place. So over time what happens, I've actually seen leather with these little bulges on it. And what was happening was the nail was about to pop through the leather in not a long time at all. So wow, these are good questions, one after another. Do we have another one?
Not right now.
Okay. So let's say, I don't advise you cannot get an upholstery tack. Oh, you can go out and get a 20 penny nail and do anything you want and go through a bigger piece of foam than this. But definitely not advisable, especially for the frame. You know, you don't want your frame to take a nail. You never see nails in a wood frame, never have nails in a wood frame, always upholstery tacks. So the next best thing, if you want that, I assume, that was Gina that asked that? I assume Gina is doing something like this. So better than that, okay, would be to spray this up off the chair. Make sure you get a good glue. And I was just about to say, I really don't like glue. I don't like spray glue. I don't like the smell of it, but sometimes you have to use it. So I'm more of a traditional upholsterer, but I'm not exclusively using, you know, natural fibers either. You know, so occasionally you have to bite the bullet, right? I have to say, I've had one can in the shop for a year. So that just goes to show you how little I use it. Now, for modern upholstery, if you're a modern upholsterer out there, you're doing commercial work, you probably think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Because if you're doing commercial work, you're not doing coil springs. You're doing foam work. So when you do a lot of foam work, you have to do techniques you have to use the glue gun. As a matter of fact, they have glue guns attached to hoses that spray really a lot of glue. You should smell those places. I'm glad I don't have to do a lot of that. But anyhow, before I go on to the next step, keep asking the questions. Please, if you haven't signed up for the classes, sign up, because one of the big differences, I love YouTube, I love the YouTube channel, and we've been doing that for 5 years. But that's just me upholstering, really. I mean, I know I'm talking a little bit, but what we're finding with these classes is some of the information that a student asks, the questions that they ask, like Jimmy, really, really go a long way to helping you at home. So if you guys have any comments, if you are signed up and you're watching, you're watching Michelle doing her chair, could you comment on that? Would be great. If you could let me know, give us feedback, that would be great. Or if you have a question about the process, that would be great. But anyhow, so what we're going to do now, so let's say we have this all glued. Okay. We have a nice, by the way, this is nice and straight. Okay, this is really straight, so that's good. If it wasn't straight, you would take your foam cutter and cut whatever the curve is on the front of the chair. Right? Right now, I'm using the edge of the foam, which is really straight. So let's say this has been glued down really well. So I'm going to sit down to show you this part. So tacks or staples. Am I in frame here, Patrick?
Yeah.
You want the foam to be even, okay? And your little edge roll would be in there, right? You'd still have your edge roll. Still use your edge roll for this. Always use your edge roll, edge roll. So the small edge roll is even a good choice for this front edge with foam. So you have this glued. Pull this down, not tight at all. You know, you want to pull it. You see this just distorting. And that's the stretch on that. And then you staple a tack right across. And when you do that, make sure, there's a wood frame here, make sure that you're away from your next tack line. Always anticipate your next tacking. So your tack line, I would be tacking about halfway on this wood rail. So I would keep this beautiful tack line open for my fabric. Okay? So, wow, you guys asked some good questions. Just gonna throw this away for now. Here, and check the cut on my finger. I think I'm going to live. That over there. I'm going to talk a little bit about this chair. This fan back chair I have a set of these. These are family heirlooms. And like I mentioned, they came to me, I think the story with these is they were in a house with the smoker. And let me tell you about cigarette smoke. Forget it. I mean, cigarette smoke and upholstery, do not go. If you're an upholsterer out there, you're smoking, try not to. I mean, really, I don't know how you would do it. It's just, for a non-smoker, you can smell something that's been around smoke. I mean, you can smell it off the furniture. So this particular client is definitely a non-smoker. So we had to take this down to the frame, except for the springs. The springs do not, Michaela, you don't smell any smoke off those springs, right? I mean, they're metal. That's one of the reasons why we couldn't use anything else, is because of the smoke smell. So even the frame, the customer wanted to professionally refinish, which we did. So we're starting brand new with an old piece of furniture. So I wanted to show you some more webbing techniques. But before I start with that, I wanted to see if there are any more questions. How many people do we have, Patrick, watching?
12.
Is Jimmy still with us?
I don't know, it's a good question.
Okay. So we've webbed the bottom, in anticipation of our spring work. Before we go to the springs, we want to start webbing the rest of the piece up, okay? And the reason we do that is because the springs are going to be in our way. So now's the time to do it, okay? So I do want to point out one thing. I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to start the back first. But I want to, this is a really important thing, okay? These wood rails right here are not intended for heavy tack work or stretching from that wood rail in a very excessive way. That said, I do have to use that wood rail to web this up, but I'm going to do a hand stretch, not a webbing stretch like I did here, okay? On the bottom, I used a webbing stretcher because on the bottom we need the springs. All the springs are going to be hand tight. We need that support on the bottom, but on the back, because of those wood rails and we need less support, we're going to do a hand tight, and I want to show you how to do that. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this to determine how many webbings we're going to need. So we're going to put 3 webbings up and down. So I'm going to turn the chair. Actually, you know what? Let's leave it up there so you can see it. Okay. I'm going to go over here and grab my hose. I have my compressor on downstairs, I believe. And what we're going to do is put the glue gun in. I mean the pneumatic staple gun in. I'm going to see to make sure that I got staples. I do. So I'm going to put my first piece of webbing like so. And I am going to notice how I'm working from the roll. I'm not pre-cutting any of my webbings. So it's hanging off the back and I'm wrapping around the back and I'm coming down. That actually is how you want to do it. When you pre-cut webbings, you tend not to get it straight the way you want it, or where you want it. And you're going to see more importantly on the next webbings what I mean by that. So I'm going to staple this. I didn't fold it, if you notice, because I couldn't do, I'm trying to get the angle for you guys. You can start with it folded if you want and stapled. Okay, so I'm going to staple it with the fold up. Why do you fold it with the up? With the fold up, it's stronger that way. What I'm going to do now is hand stretch it. Now, for you all, if you're doing this at home, you obviously aren't stapling or working like I am. You're working like this, or you might turn this. You could turn this, on its back. But I'm off to the side just to show you guys, which is no easy task, let me tell you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stretch the top. By the way, I do a lot of traditional furniture, but I'm well aware that most of the furniture, I'm on the East Coast, so I get a lot of traditional pieces of furniture. So I want to show you a sneak preview of the last class from Jimmy. Something that came in that's very interesting. I have a salesman wing chair that came in. I just want to hold this up for you. This is cool. This is a fully upholstered wing chair that was designed for the salesman. I would probably say that this was in the 30s or 40s, to go around to show house to house, in some cases, the fine workmanship of the upholstery shop. They actually made a small sample. Look, a lot of people that comes to me, they say, I want my children's chair upholstered. They aren't, or doll furniture, or doll for dolls. But it's not the case. This was, in most, 99% of the cases, it's for a salesman to show. And the detail that's in this chair is as much of the detail as there are in the full mock-up. So I thought that was pretty interesting. We're going to challenge Jimmy. If you're still watching, Jimmy's going to be challenged, and he's going to, in his last class, if you're interested, he's going to measure this, and he's going to attempt to cut the fabric. We'll see about that. But, so we're excited about that, actually. So I did want to make a point. So being on the East Coast, we do get a lot of these traditional furniture. I probably get more traditional furniture here than you would out maybe in the Midwest, for instance. So we are going to be getting into in upcoming classes, and Jimmy's class is a modern ottoman that Jimmy actually wanted to make contemporary, and that's good. I think we have another question.
Is this webbing 2 inches wide?
No. The webbing that's 2 inches wide could be, the older webbings, and the older style webbings were thin like that, or 2 inches wide. This webbing is 4 inches. So I like using this over the other thinner webbings because this has a better weave to it than what you're talking about, the 2 inch. Now on 2 inch webbing like that, it's usually more of a raw webbing. We use that a lot in museum quality repairs or reupholstery. And another question.
This is from Jimmy again.
Jimmy.
Do you always start webbing top to bottom? Does it matter?
Oh, that's a good question, Jimmy. Most of the times you're working from the back rail to begin with, the back rail to the front rail, because the front rail is smaller. So technically it's stronger than the front rail. Now we had somebody who signed up for the classes and has an East Lake furniture that has those that little wood piece on the front.
That's Sylvia.
Sylvia had that problem. So you can break the rules too, when you have to. It would be impossible to web from the back to the front over that decorative piece without breaking the decorative piece. So obviously you have to flip it around. So now what I would do in a case like that is I would get my 2 end webbings on first, which weren't impeded back to front, and then put the middle one on and maybe not use the webbing stretcher. So you're going to be faced with problems when you're upholstering, and if you look at the government description, the old descriptions of upholsterers, first thing they say is must be able to problem solve, and usually it's on the fly too, so you'll get used to that with the more work that you do. Any other questions before I finish up my thought? Okay. So if you're in a shop, most shops are doing more contemporary furniture. So Jimmy is the upcoming class. The next class we're going to have is going to be doing more of a modern piece. And then after that, Michelle, I'm kind of excited about her project because it's a tub chair. It's a fully upholstered tub chair. And so I suspect there are more people out there with furniture like that than there are with East Lake furniture, right? So do we have any more questions before I go? Okay, this is the next step. So I have my webbing, I stapled it here, and I'm going to hand stretch this. So problems, right? Problem comes up. I have a wood rail down here. It's a separation rail between the upholsteries, between the inside back and the seat, between the inside arm and the seat. That's what it's there for. They pay little attention to this for stability for some reason. So you have to kind of compensate for that. And the way I'm compensating is I'm not going to stretch it with the webbing stretcher. So I'm going to hand stretch it. Watch this. So we're going to got to get my staple gun ready. I'm going to pull this down, and if I feel this like this, it's not the drum tight. It can never be the drum tight that the webbing stretcher would be. You're not strong enough. And I don't want it to be like that. I want it to, I'm going to stretch it a little bit more by pulling up and around. It's a little bit looser than drum tight. That's all I can say to you. So I'm going to staple 4. Okay. Do we have Maddie from England tonight?
I think he's asleep.
You think he's asleep? What time is it in England, everybody? 10 o'clock. No, he wouldn't be in 10 o'clock. He wouldn't be in bed, would he?
He's probably at the pub.
Oh, you think he's at the pub?
Yeah.
Oh, well. We got Jimmy watching. I know what a saintly man he is. He's probably going off to the church after this. Live, YouTube. Got some good questions. I put 5 staples in there just to seal the deal. Right, now I want to show you why you don't pre-cut the webbing, right? Pull this over a little bit. I'm going to drape this over the back. Notice that there's more of a space up top than there is on the bottom. So what I'm doing is, I'm in the middle here, and I'm just going to let this fall on the bottom here like so. Okay. Now, some people, see where my thumb is? Some people like to use their pin tack. Pin tack the top up like that. And then they pull down this way, staple it, and then they undo the pin tack and staple up there. I don't think I have to do that. Let me get 1, 2, 3, 4. I can stretch this just like that. I don't have to fold that right now because I got my hand up here, so why not just keep going, right? So I'm going to stretch this, hand stretch this. I'm careful. I'm looking at this reel to make sure it's not moving on me. And 4 staples up top. Again, I'm off to the side to show you guys. You know, you can do this with tacks. Was it Gina that was asking about tacks? I think so. Tacks, we used to, that's all we did. When I first started in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, I was in a shop that never heard of a pneumatic staple gun. And pneumatic staple guns came out in the industry, in the commercial end of the industry, probably in the, I would have to say in the mid-70s maybe the early 70s. But we didn't catch wind of it, and upholsterers didn't catch wind of it. At least this shop didn't until, oh boy, we're talking about 80, maybe the mid-80s. So we had been spitting tacks in that particular shop since 1925. And that shop started in Newton, Massachusetts. And all of a sudden, this guy who was working for us brings in a gun. He just brought the gun. I'll never forget this because it changed my life. It was unbelievable because we were all at a stage where we were professional upholsterers spitting tacks. But this guy introduced this gun. Now we're professional upholsterers that can go twice as fast. It changed the shop. It changed my life because I don't think I would be still doing this work if I was still spitting tacks. That's a tough job, folks. It really is. Plus, it's dangerous. It is dangerous. So I'll never forget the day this guy walked in with this gun, and we were fascinated. And this has a little sleeve, just a little funny side story. So this sleeve, there's 90 pounds of pressure. I remember the first day we got the equipment in, and the old timers that were working with me, who had been spitting tacks for their whole career, and these guys were in their 80s, so they started in their 20s for 60 and sometimes more years. They were spitting tacks. Okay, but then the gun comes in, and they loved it too, except that they couldn't put the gun on the end of the hose. It was just something that was so alien to them. I guess it's like me now, my son with the technology here. The first time I saw an iPhone, and I'm still baffled by an iPhone, but it was probably the same thing. I mean, I remember how they couldn't pull this sleeve down because there's 90 pounds of pressure behind it. I suppose if we were thinking, we could have drained the compressor and made it a little easier for them, but we weren't thinking like that. But you know, they couldn't pull the sleeve down with the 90 pounds with one thumb like so, and then get it locked in like that. So that was interesting. Well, that brings back memories. So now I'm going to do the other side, unless there's a question. Jimmy, are you all out of questions? Come on, when you're in class, you ask a million questions. We can't shut you up. All right, so I'm going to cut this. Cut it about, I'm a little bit long here, but to save webbing. Another reason why you want to work from the roll is that you need to save webbing. If you were to pre-cut all this, you would end up with little pieces like this on the floor. And this stuff's a little expensive, so you don't want to do that. This saves webbing. So now we're just going to fold this over. Like I said, you don't need as much. You probably can cut it about an inch beyond the staple and then fold it. Like that. And hold on 1 second. So we know we have 17 people watching us. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Love questions. But maybe I'm just too fascinating to be asked questions. Maybe what I'm doing is just, you guys are just hypnotized. I don't know. But that's what's good about the classes. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't know how many of you people have signed up for classes, but the questions that are coming from people like Jimmy who are taking the class, he's asking good questions now, but during the class with the real world situations that come up, really questions that honestly when you've been doing something so long, and I guess this is true with everything that you're doing, it gets mechanical after a while. So I think that's what makes our online class experience better than other people's, is because of that connection between apprentice and master upholsterer. I think it's just the questions are so, you see with Jimmy, some of the questions, and Gina and Sylvia, some of the questions that are asked. You know, if I don't know a question, especially live, I'll get back to you, but so far I think we're answering their questions. But between materials, what materials to use, the techniques, how to restyle. We're going to get into restyling furniture. Jimmy's is a restyle. So he came with a very traditional ottoman, and we restyled to make it look more mid-century, which a lot of people are doing today. So we're taking a lot of furniture, for instance, traditional furniture. I have a piece in here now. It had a cut velvet, it was tufted back, diamond tufted back, and it had a straight skirt on it with box cushions. So the young people who inherited this wanted to kind of modernize it. I said, well, you can do that. You don't have to eliminate all that beautiful tufting, because sometimes in mid-century they do have that, or they have buttons. So we kept the tufted back. We eliminated the skirt. I added a base welt around the base. We kept the cushions, and we went to a fabric that was like a gray solid. So it really made for a beautiful looking, it's a cross between traditional and mid-century, I know, but it really came out nice. So we're hoping the customer likes it. So let's get this other piece on, unless we have another question. No, okay. So, check my finger to see. I guess I'm okay. I was growing a little faint there with the blood flow, but I think I'm okay. It wasn't that bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to drape this down like this. And staple. And then I'm going to hand stretch up. I'm going to try to get this a little closer to the staples and try to save some webbing. Okay. Okay. So we have 3 webbings up and down. Let's just take care of this one. Okay. So now we're going to do some cross webbings. So these wood rails are much stronger, but that doesn't mean we can use our webbing stretcher, and we're not going to use our webbing stretcher because this is a curve. So what you have to get used to in upholstery is that everything that you do right from the foundation is going to work its way up. Okay? So this has a curved back. So what you don't want to do, and it's the same thing when we're putting the fabric on this, or the burlap, and the fabric, is that because it's a curved back, you can't stretch it too tight side to side. So the stretching, if you've taken a class, and if you signed up and you're watching these online classes, I have a lot of emphasis on how to stretch fabric, and I think that's, if anything's missing from custom upholstery or from upholstery in general, especially from the manufacturing end, is the lost art of stretching materials. And that includes more than just fabric, like I just said. This is really interesting how that has been lost. And I think you only get that in a traditional training, the emphasis on stretching fabric. That's why pin tacking is so important. Jimmy today pin tacked his cambric on, just the bottom piece. If he had just stapled it on, he wouldn't have had the opportunity because he had to readjust a couple of places. It was easier to take a tack out than put a tack back than it is to take a staple out. right? So we have another question.
Do you need to fold and staple? Is that a stronger method? This is from Jimmy too.
Well, Jimmy, I've seen people just, you saw what I did down here, like right here, actually. So I did this, when you're starting on an end like this, you can fold it and staple it. We have a question coming in on the phone. I wonder who that is. Hold on a second. So Jimmy, good question, Jimmy. Sorry, everybody. So the answer is, when you're using your webbing stretcher from the opposite side, we didn't use it here, but we hand stretch this. Same thing applies to the hand stretching. We stretch it and staple it, cut it, and then fold it. So in answer to your question, you can do either or down at the bottom, or the opposite side.
We have a very nice comment that was left.
We have a comment. What was it, Patrick?
Michaela?
This is from Lauren. She says that she's watched several of your tutorials, and the comment you made about problem solving is so true. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I will be signing up for your school soon.
Great. Well, thank you for that encouragement, Lauren. We really appreciate it. I think by teaching online and by teaching in general in my classes at the shop, I think what I'm doing is saving a lot of stress. I think that by showing you the mistakes that people can make, it's going to save you so much time. It might even keep you going in the industry. It's not to say the mistakes, you don't learn from your mistakes. I think you do, and I think you will make them. But I think that if you can prevent a lot of them too, that's a good thing. So thank you for the nice comment. I appreciate it. Okay. So Jimmy, just to follow up on Jimmy, I hope that answered your question, Jimmy. The very inquiring mind that Jimmy has. He's one of my best students. By the way, Jimmy was one of my first students at the upholstery school here. So we really appreciate Jimmy. He walked out today with a beautiful, he did this ottoman in a traditional diamond fabric. Usually you see that in the beginning of upholstery. That was an old horsehair fabric design. But Jimmy had it in a more modern fabric, and he was really happy with it. So he walked out here proud. Walking across the street though, there was a semi coming. I was a little worried about him. Jimmy, are you okay? We have another question.
This is from Gina.
Gina. Hi, Gina.
She says, I have my grandmother's platform rocker. The seat is concave. Was this common originally? The only photos I found so far have a crown seat.
Interesting. So she has a photo of a crown, when it was a crown seat? Or another rocker maybe that was a crown seat? She doesn't say. So there is such thing called a saddle seat.
Well, first of all, also send that picture along if you want. We can take a look at it. And,
Patrick, director, has just said to send that picture along if you like. But I want to,
email.
in an email, at upholsteryonbroadway@gmail.com. But I did want to answer your question. It's interesting, actually. There are such things as saddle seats. A saddle seat does not have springs, first of all. But a saddle seat, when you're at eye level with it, it looks like this, like a crescent moon this way. They call them saddle seats. And if it's a saddle seat, there's nothing wrong with it. It actually looks, and I've seen where people have tried to take a saddle seat and turn it into an upholstered crown seat. It doesn't work. Saddle seats have their own little distinction, and they're actually kind of comfortable. They fit your bottom a little bit better than sometimes a crown seat does. And if it's a crown seat and you want to save the fabric, we'll be showing you methods on how to recover. We actually do have one coming up. What was the grandmother's needlepoint, Patrick, that we did?
That's live on YouTube now. That's already up.
That's already been up.
Yeah.
It's not too late, by the way.
Wait, actually, you know what? No, I'm thinking of the Martha Washington. That one will be up next week.
Next class shows how to rescue. I think the title is How to rescue grandma's, it's a YouTube, isn't it, Patrick?
Yeah, it'll be up next week.
How to rescue grandma's needlepoint. And it shows you that the needlepoint was just like this, it was drooping like that in the middle. Actually, Michaela helped us with this. She was helping out with repairing and restoring these. But we show you a way of just stop the pain, you know, stopping them from going all the way through, because we want to save grandma's, you know, beautiful work. And we did on 6 chairs. As a matter of fact, Patrick, you don't know this, but that client's mother called me from Boston, said, I have needlepoint chairs too from a different branch of the family that need to be rescued.
Wow.
So we're going to be doing that.
Cool.
Is there another question before I go on?
No, that's it.
Okay. Well, we're having fun with these live classes. We love the banter back and forth with our subscribers. Oh, and if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We just hit 6,000. Very happy about that. But we really want to keep going on the YouTube. We're not neglecting the YouTube channel on the free videos. But like I said, I think you're getting a lot more in-depth information. You see it even in these live classes. There's a little bit more in-depth information, but on the online classes, wow, you're not gonna be unhappy. I think every episode has things in it that are gonna help you. So side to side, how many webbing side to side do we do? We don't need as many as you think because most of our support is coming up and down. So I think I'm only going to put 3 side to side. That's a judgment call. But these are going to be even stretched less than the up and down. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with it in the middle. We're going to start in the middle. And over and under. We're weaving, right? I'm going to staple. I'm going to pull this. This is very light. So what I don't want to do, I'm not pulling this so much though so that it takes the curve. You can't make it a flat back. You have to make it curve. So it's hardly, I'm only kind of setting that in. It's hardly a stretch at all. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but the more, if I'm dramatic, look at how much it pulls off this webbing. That's not good. You don't want that. So these webbings, you might ask, well, why is he putting them in? It's because of this action, right? You need it there for that back action like that. So I'm going to staple it. I love the nuances in upholstery. We have another question.
Gina says the photos that she's found of this platform rocker is just photos found online. She said all the photos found online have a crown seat.
Ah, okay. Okay. So the crown seat is sagging.
Yeah, that's what she said.
So that means that the springs, you might want to look underneath to see if the springs, remember we talked a little bit about it on this project, that the webbing will have a tendency of, first it will loosen and then it will cave in. And then the springs will actually be through the bottom. But you're talking about something over time. Could be 100 years till that happens, but this sounds like an older platform rocker. So take a look underneath, see if you can see inside, to see if you can see the coil springs. I don't know if you buy it now, but it would be nice to get an answer.
She says that feeling through the fabric, it feels like just rope tying the inside. The seat hangs from the front and back and side to
Camber.
side.
So you don't feel any metal spring work at all.
Oh, camber, yeah, sorry.
So it could be that it's just webbed on the top. Could be a couple of things, webbed on the top and then built from the top like I showed you on the foam on this. It could have been, it could be that at some point they took the springs out, so I wouldn't know until I actually saw it or until there's more detail in it. Could be a number of things. It sounds like definitely it needs to be fixed. So you could surgically, if you're trying to save the fabric, I'm not sure if that's the case, you could surgically, starting from the bottom, undo the fabric and see what's inside. Okay? So we're going to take, we've got about 5 more minutes, so hopefully I can get this back on in 5 minutes. So I'm going to cut this. So our next class is Monday. That's the 7th Michelle class, Patrick?
No,
I mean,
7.
how many is that? Sorry. 6?
5.
Her 5th class this Monday?
Yeah.
This coming Monday.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention that it's not too late to join up for that first class. I mean, you have access,
Forever.
a 1-year access, Patrick?
No, once you pay for that class, you'll have it forever.
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 So it's a forever class. Yeah, so never too late to sign up for class. And if anybody ever wanted to do an Eastlake, Michelle does, she has an Eastlake chair she's doing in class. And she has another one she did at home. Can you believe that? So she took full use, she get full use out of her class, and she was never happier. You'll see the finished product. So now I'm going to put one on the bottom and one on the top. And it's not too late to get a question in if somebody wants to ask one. Special thanks to Jimmy for all his interesting questions. We got an email from somebody who says they're watching, they love the YouTube channel, and they just like watching people work. And I know there are people like that out there, you know, that like that. That's fine. I think that's great. So, notice how on these ones here I alternated the webbing. Just ever so slightly, hardly a stretch at all. Hardly a stretch at all. Cut this. And staple this. And I want to talk a little bit about how I'm going to finish this chair. You know, the other thing that we want to get into is, I don't know how many, I need to get an idea, how many people out there are at a point where they think they want to do it, work professionally. I'll ask you now, anybody out there who's watching now who has taken a job on and been paid, that's, if you've done that, you're a professional. You get paid for something, you're a professional. But I'm wondering, trying to get an idea, how many people are interested in pricing furniture, talking to a customer about style changes and things like that, or more advanced. So I would say that the person I'm thinking about has been upholstering for maybe 4 or 5 years, or 5 to 10 years, and they're interested in, maybe they were hobbyists, but they're interested in doing it professionally. So we're trying to get an idea of what we're going to present more on the website. So we may present seminars on pricing and talking to customers and what that entails. And it does entail a lot. It depends on what part of the country you're in for pricing, and there's a lot of factors. So let us know. Give us your feedback. Okay? So another live YouTube, and we really appreciate you, the viewers and subscribers and people especially who've gone on the online classes and joined. I'm trying to build these relationships. Hopefully, you know, who knows what it could do for you. I know upholstery's done a fabulous thing for me. I've been doing it for 42 years, and I don't regret a day that I'm working. So thanks you, and I'll see you next time.